Welcome into episode 35. This is part two. We had the reaction to the National Series with Jacob and I. Now we have a special guest, Jay Posner of the Union-Tribune, the sports editor there. Thank you so much, Jay, for taking some time here on a Friday morning.
Sure, Ben. Happy to be here.
All right. So first off, I had some questions for you before last night's game happened. So I just want to first get your reaction down 8-0. Just the comeback, just your reaction overall, the story with Daniel Camarena, and will you be walking with Mud and Don?
Boy, I got to build up to 29 miles, but if I'm not walking, I'm definitely contributing. I'll put it that way. I don't even know what to say. I didn't know what to say last night. I mean, the only thing that came to mind was, just when you think you've seen everything in sports, and I've been around sports for a long time and been a fan for, gosh, probably almost half a century now, maybe, as I date myself there. But my good friend and colleague Nick Canepa has always said, just when you think you've seen it all, or you never think you always think you've seen it all, but you really haven't. Mm-hmm. And last night was an example of that. I mean, I'm sure, in fact, I know for a fact that Jace Tingler was being cursed out all over Twitter. Of course, that's I guess that's a normal occurrence.
Yep.
Sometimes justifiably, sometimes not. Last night was clearly a case where it was 8-0. The bullpen had been used up the night before. They knew they had another bullpen game coming tonight, and I think he just felt like, look, I got to send this guy up because I can't use Daniel Camarena for one inning in this situation. So, we're losing 8-2. It's hard for anybody to say what they would have done in that situation, knowing everything that he knows. But he sent Camarena up. There's no question. No matter what anybody would say, nobody expected anything to happen there. I did think on the one foul ball, I think Camarena had, it was like, all right, well, that looks like a decent enough swing. But I mean, he was facing Max Scherzer. He wasn't facing just some run of the mill guy. And for him, throwing, Scherzer obviously didn't want the ball there. You don't throw a ball down and into any left-handed hitter, I think, if you can help it. And you always talk about running into one, and Camarena ran into one, and he hit that ball a long way. I mean, that wasn't a little, Yankee Stadium pop-up type of home run. That thing went over the big wall in right field, and just unbelievable story. I only wish I was there. The noise, I mean, felt like you could hear it all over the county. From the crowd, from the dugout, really gave a lift to the team. And the great story of all is, obviously the kid's from here. He used to go to games there. He played there in high school and waited all this time to get into the major leagues, and had some family members there. I mean, everything about it was, I said late last night on Twitter, if you didn't love that moment, you're not a sports fan. I mean, that's why you watch games, is for moments like that. And what a great moment for him. And adding to it, of course, for him and the Padres, is that they came back and won the game, and they won a game when they were down 8-0, something that they're, trailing by 8 runs, which is only the third time in their history that they had ever done that.
Yeah. And you mentioned just the moment. The regular season's so long. We all know that. 162 games, 6 months. You don't remember the, August 2nd game, Tuesday night game or whatever. You remember these moments. You remember Joe Musgrove's no-hitter. You remember Tatis' 5-homer weekend. You remember Tatis' 3-homer game. You remember sweeping the Dodgers. You remember this. That's what you remember, and that's what makes these games, at least for the Padres this year, so special, because you don't know what's going to happen. They could go lose 10 by 10 the night before and look like it's deja vu all over again. And it's the opposite of that. So yeah, that was a cool moment. Moving now to the questions I did have. As the sports editor now at the Tribune, a lot of your focus is on the Padres as being the only major, big pro sports team in San Diego. I'm curious as to what your kind of schedule and planning looks like for every week of Padre coverage if that changes at all?
No, I mean, it's the one thing about baseball is it's every day. And that's sort of its blessing and its curse. I think in our case at the Union-Tribune, it's a blessing. As you said, it's the only major professional sports team in town. I think the only team I would say that even competes with it in terms of interest level, based on the numbers that we have, is Aztecs basketball. When they're doing well and rolling as they have been most of the time over these past many years, a lot of interest in that team. But there's nothing else that comes close to the Padres. We have two full-time beat people out there. Kevin Acey, who's been doing this for a long time, seems to work about 26 hours a day, I think, for the most part. Although I will say he took last night he left early. He was working ahead on some stuff, so he left it for Jeff Sanders to do, and Jeff does a good job filling in and also keeping up with the minor leagues. And then we also have coverage from Bryce Miller writes columns about the Padres at times. I mean, not fairly regularly. Tom Krasovic writes a lot about them, although he's been on vacation recently. So I won't say that in terms of planning, it's pretty much kind of on a daily basis, but sometimes with a big picture, like with the All-Star game. We have a couple things planned for. We know what we're doing for Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Kevin has an idea what he's doing for the start of the second half, but a lot of it is, I don't want to seat of the pants. Sounds like we don't know what we're doing. I do think we know what we're doing, but it's really on a day-to-day basis. Like, okay, what are we going to do? We had a plan for tonight and how we were going to cover tonight's game, and early deadlines enter into it in terms of what we're going to do, where we really need an early story before the game. We had a plan for a story. That plan's out the window now, because the story tonight should be a follow-up on Daniel Camarena, trying to talk to him today about what, 24 hours later, what's your life like now, things like that. So you can have a lot of plans, things happen, you got to be able to adjust, be flexible. And I'm fortunate that Kevin and Jeff are both really good at doing that. And I think we all work well together, and hopefully, provide coverage that people enjoy reading.
Now, does your plans change or is altered at all when a game like earlier this year that goes past midnight, the first Padre Dodger game this year? What changes there?
Well, what changes is that the result doesn't get in the newspaper. But there's a story that's in the paper, and it's just an incomplete story about here's what's happened so far. That happened last night. I mean, we printed an edition early, before 9:30. Fortunately, Camarena's slam came before that, so we were able to have a story for all the editions today that said what happened with his home run. We had a great picture of it. But the final score was not in the paper, unfortunately for people. It was in the second edition. The final edition gets updated, and then we also have our electronic edition that doesn't get composed, I guess you'd say, until after midnight. And so when there's a really late game, you can always read it in that edition in sort of newspaper form. And of course, whenever the game ends, it goes online on the website. So whatever time that might be. And I was at that Friday night game with the Dodgers, and it seems like a lot of the Friday games have been late ones, actually.
Yeah. So moving to just the Padres in general here, if you had to give, 2 or 3 major takeaways so far this season, what would they be?
I think with what the one obvious takeaway is the Tatis, and the idea, and I see this, I see kids around town wearing Tatis jersey. You see them wearing all kinds of jerseys, but especially the Tatis jerseys. the braids on the back of that attached to your hat, that sort of thing. I think, and I've talked about this before, we are really fortunate in San Diego to have a guy like that to watch every single day. The Padres, it's no mystery. The Padres have been bad for a long time. They've had one good, until last season, they had one good season in a dozen years or whatever it was. But on top of that, there weren't really any like star players that you wanted to watch. And, I always judge the player on, do you need to be in your seat when this guy comes to the plate? Or is it a time where you can go get a hot dog or a beer, or if you have enough money for a beer, that sort of thing. But you cannot leave your seat if Fernando Tatis is coming to bat. I would say the same about Manny Machado. And the thing about those two guys is you can't leave your seat when they're playing defense either. They're so special defensively, especially Machado. But Tatis, what I was going to get to is, if you're a kid right now, and you're a 6 or 7 year old kid, and I don't want to say boy, because boys and girls follow the Padres. The rest of your childhood, you're going to get to watch Fernando Tatis Jr. play every single day for the Padres. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that doesn't happen in San Diego. We haven't had a player like that here. And even Tony Gwynn, as great as Tony Gwynn was, he wasn't this kind of player. He was steady, he was consistent. He occasionally did spectacular things, but he didn't do what Tatis does. And it's no slight against Gwynn. Almost no one who's ever played baseball can do what Tatis does. So I think that's a takeaway, is just seeing him grow to this point where every single day that he's able to play, we should feel fortunate that we're able to do it. I think my other takeaway, if you just want a couple, is the Padres have really wasted some opportunities here in the first half. Their pitching has been, now the starting pitching has dropped off recently, and certainly, Darvish's last couple of games have not been very good, but their run prevention has been tremendous all year. The bullpen especially, and piecing together all the innings that they've had to piece together out of the bullpen. And yet, while their record is good, it's probably not as good as it should be. It feels like they've let, a few games get away where the record should be maybe 3 or 4 games better. And they've certainly had games that they won that they shouldn't have won. Like, you wouldn't think they would win, like last night. But I feel like their offense has really let them down through some stretches here, and they've wasted opportunities to really build up more wins. The way the schedule breaks down, they should be fine. They should make the playoffs. But, the way the Dodgers have faltered this year, and not recently, of course, but the Padres should be ahead of the Dodgers now. They shouldn't be trailing the Dodgers. And I think that could be that's a missed opportunity. I didn't think they had any chance at the start of the season to beat out the Dodgers for the NL West. But the way the Dodgers have played, you would think, hey, maybe they did. And they still do. But I just feel like it's sort of a wasted opportunity there.
Yeah. That was my next question about, is if there was anything you'd kind of be disappointed in thus far this season, it would definitely be those lost, kind of opportunities. There's a few games that come to mind, or at least series that come to mind for me. The Pirates splitting that 4-game series. It's been pretty much the entire year. Obviously people are going to look at losing 13 out of 17 games, going 1-5 on a road trip that involves the Rockies. That's definitely not something that you would want. And maybe that's something that at the end of the year, they might look back on and be like, oh, wow, well, that bit us in the butt.
Stuff like that happens. So, I mean, you get swept at Coors Field, but you sweep the Dodgers. And you go 4-13, but then you also go 11-1. I think baseball's filled, baseball is not a sport that's made for daily, hourly, minute by minute analysis that it's become because of, at least in some respects, because of Twitter. But I think it's a sport that it's a long season. Teams are built for the long haul, and you can't get the players always talk about, oh, you can't get too high, you can't get too low. But as a fan, it gets, it can be very frustrating during losing 13 out of 17 and feeling like there's opportunities. But I feel even in the big picture, when you're looking at, I don't know how many games that they played now, about 90.
Yeah.
So when you look at the 90 game picture, it just feels like given the pitching they've had, they've let a few wins. They've let a few wins get away.
Yeah. Moving to Blake Snell, he probably won't start tonight, right?
Correct. He's not pitching tonight. Yeah.
Yeah. It's been obviously not what fans have wanted. They were imagining, the Cy Young Blake Snell, the guy that dominated the Dodgers. And we have seen that a couple of times this year. He's put together back-to-back, I'd say, good starts for Blake Snell of, circumstances this year. What are your thoughts on him just this year? Do you think, he can go back to that Cy Young type pitcher?
Well, I certainly wouldn't predict that he could go back to that level, because he hasn't shown us that he can do that on a consistent level. He would be one of the people, if you were talking about, disappointments in the first half, he would be very high on the list. Guys like Eric Hosmer would be high on the list. Will Myers would be on the list, somewhere as well. But a couple of injuries would be on the list. But I think Snell obviously would be on the list. Chris Paddock would be on the list. At times, Paddock's actually shown more at times than it seems like than Snell has, his last start notwithstanding. But there's no question, when the Padres traded for Snell, they gave up a lot. When I first saw that deal and what was involved, I cringed a little bit. Giving up Patino or Wilcox felt like that was a lot. Giving up both those guys felt like it really was a lot. But if you were going to get the Blake Snell that we saw, as you said, dominating the Dodgers, and even most of the time through the past few years, and you're trying to win right now in the next couple of years, then there's certainly a lot of justification for that deal. There's no question he's been a disappointment. I don't know enough about pitching to know why, other than he doesn't throw enough strikes. He doesn't seem to have the command night in and night out, even inning in and inning out. He seems to go through these times where he'll have a couple of great innings, and then he'll have an inning where all of a sudden things just go off the rails. So it would be such a huge boost for the Padres to be able to get that. I mean, right now, I don't know what's up with Darvish. They mentioned last night he had some tightness in his back and hip area, so maybe he's not 100%. Maybe he even bails out of the All-Star game this week. It seems like he could use maybe use a rest. But you would count on Yu Darvish right now as your number one starter. But who's your number two? I guess it's Musgrove, but he's had his shaky moments as well. So that's the period where you're looking at Snell, you're looking at Musgrove. What do we have? Who's going to be our 2 and 3 starters at this point? Maybe it's Ryan Weathers. I don't know. And I don't know what kind of condition Ryan Weathers will be in at the end of the season, just because this will be as long a season as Weathers has ever had. So you hope he holds up.
Yeah, I was talking with Marty Caswell yesterday, and you talking with Ryan Weathers, and I was thinking that we don't know what condition he'll be at the end of the year, but it's also a possibility, I think, that if he's healthy, maybe they use him out of the bullpen, or if Lamet's healthy, they piggyback them in a start. Those are all possibilities that could help. But then if you piggyback those two, then you're finding another guy that has to start, and you're just it's just a search for innings is really what we're coming down to. And that makes it really tough based on, you don't want to tax the bullpen. And we've seen that's already happened this year. I don't think they could survive a repeat of this year if the bullpen keeps being taxed like this. You have older guys. You have Melanson there. It seems like the bullpen is older more than it's younger. And so that part kind of worries me. Just what are your thoughts on the bullpen usage, so far this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think what you said is a good point about some of those guys. And I do think that goes to one of the things that they've tried to do, and I know that we've written about this before, is that, they are meticulous in their charting of how much guys throw and when they warm up and how many games they're in and how often do they pitch and how many pitches do they throw. And I think all of that is with an eye on trying to make sure that individual guys are not overused. And they've done a pretty good job of rotating some people in from the minors. I mean, Camarena is a perfect example. Northwood, Nick Ramirez, Chris Matt, in a sense, has been a godsend, a guy that can come in and eat up innings. I mean, like the other night, throwing 5 innings and he only gave up 1 run. I remember he had an outing or two against the Dodgers where he did well. Bullpens always seem like they're, you talked about older guys. Craig Stammen is another one that's been around a while, and I think Stammen, he can be a bit of a punching bag for people at times, but if you look at his overall season, he's been really good this year, and I think he's a extremely valuable member of the bullpen. Matt Strahm is supposedly on his way back. That's like that's like trading for a pitcher at midseason if you can get Matt Strahm back. So I think that'll be a bonus. Lamet, I don't think you can say you can count on Lamet at this point. Just hasn't shown that he can go, week after week after week. But if he could, that'd be another guy that would help out in the rotation. And then you could, as you said, you could drop Weathers into a more of a bullpen role. So I think the bullpen's been tremendous. I think it's fair for people to worry about whether they've been overused. But there's no way to know if that's going to be an issue or not. I mean, I think these guys have continued to pitch pretty well, through each time they've gotten, like Pierce Johnson got a 10-day break. Pomeranz certainly had time off. I think that the way they've handled the bullpen seems to be with an idea of keeping it as fresh as possible. But at some point, it really does feel like they're going to need some starters to start going deeper into games.
Yeah. Keeping it at the pitching level here, at the deadline, you look at Padres Twitter, everyone's wanting, AJ Preller needs to go make a move right now. He can't wait till July 30th. And people don't realize that that's not his top priority right now. The draft's this week. We know AJ Preller is huge on scouting. That's where he's focused right now. So that's going to have to delay till after the draft at least. Where would you, if you were AJ Preller, you had a choice between the bullpen and the starting rotation, where would you upgrade?
Right now, I think from what we've seen recently, I think they need a starter more than a bullpen. I think they have enough people in the bullpen to piece this together, and especially if you get another starter to eat up some of those innings. But I think I might have said bullpen a few weeks ago. I think right now, and not saying they don't need both, but if you're and not saying they're not going to get both, but I would be very surprised if after next week, after the All-Star game, that the Padres don't get a starting pitcher sometime in the next couple of weeks. No idea who that would be. No idea who I would even want it to be. I mean, it's not something I've looked at carefully, but I would expect someone to be in here, like I said, in the next couple of weeks, once, as you said, once the draft is over and the All-Star game's over.
Mm-hmm. Fans have been clamoring as of late for Joey Gallo. I think it's not a good idea. Where do you stand on Joey Gallo just coming to the Padres? It doesn't fit in my view, obviously with Myers' contract. It just doesn't fit for me. Where do you stand on potentially getting Gallo?
Boy, he's I don't even know. I was going to say a polarizing player. He's a polarizing player in my own head. I'm not just personally speaking, I'm not a fan of guys like that, where he's really the 3 true outcome guy, where he's going to strike out, he's going to walk, or he's going to hit a home run. That's what he does. He gets on base. When he hits the ball, it goes a long way a lot of the time. He misses the ball a lot. I really haven't. I don't know. I guess it would depend on what are you getting him for, how much, what are you giving up, and what's your plan for him? when he gets here. So, are you going to put Myers on the bench? Are you going to put Hosmer on the bench? Are you going to do some sort of rotation? In that way. I don't know. I do think the other thing they need a bench piece. I don't know if, maybe Brian O'Grady's not the answer. Maybe he is, but I thought Jorge Mateo last year showed like he could be a pretty good guy off the bench. He seemed decent in the field. He runs extremely well. He's probably the fastest guy on the team, but his offense this year has just been so poor that it feels like they need a spot there. I mean, your Profar and Kim and the backup catcher are gonna be there, and maybe a third. We talked about this on our Hot Lava podcast recently. Maybe a third catcher is a guy that is your extra bench piece, because then you can use Austin Nola. You can keep him from having to catch all the time and sort of move him around and be a versatile piece as both a starter and a bench guy. So, but I do think they need at least one more guy on the bench.
Mm-hmm. Moving to Tommy Pham, he was the fans' punching bag early in the year.
Mm-hmm.
Eric Hosmer is that guy now, it seems like, him and Paddock as of late.
Yeah.
So do you see Tommy Pham, if he keeps this up? I know that's a big, it's not known if he will do this, but if he keeps this up, do you see the Padres kind of making it a priority to keep him after this year?
Oh boy. I don't know. I guess I would let him hit I think I would let him hit the market and see what the market is for someone like him at his age. Let's see what happens over the next 3 months. I mean, he went through a little bit of a big rough stretch recently. Although you talk about a rough stretch, I mean, that it's like 4 games, where he didn't have a hit. It was a lot of at bats, but it's 0 for 19 or whatever it was. It's 4 games. It's certainly not any reason to panic. He has shown very well. He's shown, since that beginning that he now looks like the player that everybody thought the Padres were getting when the deal was made. So I would let that play out. I don't think that's a priority at this point to do any sort of contract talks during the year or anything. So I think I would let it play out and see how he does, see what his mood is in terms of coming back, see what he would get, see how much it would cost, see where you are with some of the other contracts and go from there. But he's definitely a guy that's come back. I mean, you got to give him credit. He was not good last year. He was terrible at the beginning of this year, and he's been really, really good for the past couple months.
Yeah. Last one, 4 Padres All-Stars. As of now, you mentioned Darvish might pull out with the back issue. The 2 big snubs were Joe Musgrove and Manny Machado. It seemed a lot of people on Twitter thought Machado was the bigger snub. I was more, if you listen to this podcast, I was pretty heated about Musgrove missing out. Just because obviously the story, he's been an all-star at least, most of the time this year. He's had to grind through starts, but I think obviously the no-hitter really helps his resume. Just the story, obviously, yes, I might be biased, but I think that this year, the 1 player per team rule kind of screwed him because, German Marquez has an ERA like a full run higher than his.
Yeah.
They're 1 all-star. So who do you think was the bigger snub, Manny or Musgrove?
Well, I mean, I think based on the competition, I'm not sure I would qualify either one to be a snub. I think the other starters, there are a lot of good starting pitchers in the National League who didn't make it. Walker Buehler didn't make it. The guy we saw last night, Max Scherzer, didn't make it, and his numbers were incredible until the 4th inning last night. So I thought Musgrove was good. It didn't, it didn't bother. None of this bothers me, but it didn't bother me that he didn't make it. Machado, if you look at his numbers now, yeah, he's an all-star. If you look at his numbers when people were voting on this stuff, he probably wasn't. He was in the middle of getting his numbers up to where, they always, where you feel like they always should have been. But, to me, if you're going to pick one, Machado's an all-star because he's an all-star player. I mean, he's one of the best players around. You know, it's hard. People don't look at defensive metrics when they're voting for all-stars. His defense is just incredible. I had no idea he was this good. I knew he was good defensively. Until you watch him every day, you have no appreciation for how good he is. So, and I don't know that Manny is the kind of guy that gets bothered by this kind of stuff, and maybe he ends up getting picked, gets picked anyway. But I didn't have a big issue with, honestly, with either one of those guys getting left out. I mean, there's so many teams and so many guys that have to make it that, look, the Padres had years where they didn't deserve to have anybody make it either. And the one player rule benefited them. So when you're at the top, it's going to hurt you. When you're at the bottom, it's going to help you. I think as a Padre fan, you should just be happy they're at the top, and you've got that problem to worry about. It's a lot better than the problem we used to have to worry about.
Right. Yeah. All right. Well, this has been great. Jay Posner, Union-Tribune. Thank you so much for taking some time. Hopefully this All-Star break goes well for, Chris Paddock, Blake Snell, guys that really need it.
Right.
Darvish. Thank you so much for joining, and we'll talk down the road.
Happy to do it. Thank you.